first, of course, is that Arendt was not only a student of Heidegger, as you probably know, but also an intimate, and this has been the source of a great deal of biographical attention to her. In particular, biographers have wanted to know whether she broke with him intellectually, whether she confronted him on his now famous vocal and institutional support of the Nazi Party, and some of the more subtle efforts to rethink her life have focused on the ways in which she apparently rewrote his philosophical positions. I would want to make just one point here that I think becomes important for understanding her social theory, but also her conception of thinking. And you'll remember that I started this today by asking what are the rudiments of thinking. For those of you who know Heidegger's Being and Time, you probably also know that it focuses, at least apparently, on resolute individuals, and that it fails to think very carefully or explicitly about how Dasein, our existence as being there, the condition of human existence, is also a social existence. In fact, Heidegger offers a very, very brief discussion of what it would be to be with others, or what is being with, Mitsein. And it's considered, I think, even by those who have lots of praise for Heidegger in other domains, it's considered a brief, truncated, and insufficient explanation of the social. And in fact, at one point, when asked what the social is, and indeed there is a discussion of this in Being and Time as well, he says it is the everyman. It's the world of replaceable, conformist individuals. And there is something of that survives in Arendt as well, when she talks about the social as a domain of anonymity. But I think there's a social theory, and indeed even a conception of the social that goes beyond what Arendt has to say about that, and certainly supplements what Heidegger has to say in a really important way. So if one realizes that Arendt not only develops a social theory, but comes to redefine thinking as something that requires a certain relation to oneself and a certain relation to others, and that this dialogic form is essential to what thinking is, then it seems to me that Arendt has developed not merely a corrective to Heidegger, but an alternative framework altogether. Indeed, her entire engagement with political theory and even the history of politics, which includes an extensive discussion of the history of revolutions, and I would include here as well a critique of totalitarianism, establishes a very different approach to some of these same kinds of questions. So it's clear she moves away from Heidegger's notion of fundamental ontology, the difference between being, capital B, and small being. She moves away from his notion of Dasein. She expands and even rewrites his notion of Mitsein. She continues still to be interested in questions of ontology, theories of being, and even with the question of what is called thinking. So in this way, we can see her as taking up very key terms within the Heideggerian philosophy and pursuing them in another direction. Okay, so German Jewishness. I said I had 3 points to make. The first one was about Heidegger Arendt, which is a German-Jewish encounter. German-Jewish. German non-Jewish, German-Jewish. I have 2 other points in relationship. And remember, my very first point about German-Jewish was Rachel von Hagen. Right? And Arendt's own biographical interest in her. Now, so here's actually my second or third point, I guess, depending how you're counting. There were some very well-known essays by a Jewish philosopher, Hermann Cohen, that were published in the 1890s. And Cohen died in 1918 and wrote mainly in the 80s, 90s, and the first 2 decades of the 20th century. He wrote a substantial book, Deutschtum und Judentum, so Germanness and Jewishness, but the tune is more like the reign of, or the domain of, and Cohen's argument, interestingly enough, was in favor of German-Jewish alliance. He thought this was extremely important, and he quarreled with the early formulations of Zionism in the 1890s. Indeed, the first World Congress on Zionism took place in the 1890s. And Cohen said, no, the Jews do not need their own state, they do not need their own nation, they are a people who really belong to Germany. Yeah. And indeed, it was an incredible essay. It remains a painful and incredible essay. Since he actually makes the case that Germany is the safest place for the Jews. Now, of course, Cohen's articles on this have become increasingly painful to read over time, since he believed that Europe would protect Jews against anti-Semitism. But if we were to look back on these essays, especially those that focus explicitly on the relation of Germans and Jews, we would see, I think, a tenacious belief that Jewishness and Germanness are interlinked, and that it's not possible to think the one mode of belonging without the other. So he actually had a kind of synthesis that he was building between what he called Jewish messianism and German humanism. And Derrida also, by the way, gave a full-year seminar on this particular problem. There are some versions of it that have been translated into English. For those of you who are interested, I can tell you about that as well. But in any case, Cohen completely denied or failed to see some kind of denégation, a kind of seeing without seeing, the deep-seated character of anti-Semitism in Germany, but he was also less interested in what Germany actually was, or what the social trends in Germany happened to be, or even what Europe actually was, than he was in certain ideals that he understood as emerging from Germany, and those were, for him, explicitly Kantian. So, when he thought about this link between German philosophy and Jewishness, he was actually thinking about Kant and German ethical philosophy that follows from Kant, strong versions of universality. He was one of the main formulators of what's called the Marburg School of Neo-Kantianism. And his task there was to try to reconcile certain notions of social justice derived from Jewish theological resources with principles of universality derived from Kant. So he not only argued in favor of a German-Jewish nexus or crossing, but he made that nexus into the point or the aim or the explicit normative goal of his own philosophy. In his book Reason and Hope, he argued explicitly for a marriage of German humanism and Jewish messianism, a coupling that he understood to yield what he called a religion of reason. And in his work Deutschtum und Judentum,